And welcome back to another episode of Make Calcutta Relevant Again, the podcast. And today we've been thinking about doing some kind of a special episode, and I'm not really sure what I'm doing on this seat because for all of those of you who watch this podcast regularly, I am on another seat. But we thought that maybe we switch it around a little bit and have a new kind of an episode. I don't know what is exactly happening.
Bro, sorry, I thought I was gonna start the podcast.
Oh, well, we are like a couple of minutes in, but I mean, who are you? Why? What are you doing? Why are you on my seat, man? What's happening?
Yeah, it's because I'm white.
Well, there's this random white man who has decided to take up the hot seat today, and we are switching the script. So we have a new podcast host. I will let you start hosting from this point on. Why don't you start by introducing yourself, and after that I will stop asking the questions so that you can.
So thank you, first of all, for letting me use your studio and for accepting to be on my podcast, both of you. Basically, my name is Tomas Magalhaes. I'm Portuguese. I have a podcast called Despolariza, which means depolarize. It's all about nuance and learning to disagree better and learning to not make so many enemies on the internet, for instance, but also in real life.
Much needed in today's day and age.
Yeah. But before that, I had started a project called Kolkata Relief. I was here during the monsoon season in 2017. And basically a street family asked me for help because it was raining a lot, and they showed me their 3 kids were in a small shack. It was raining inside, and they said 4 words which changed my life, which were help me one roof. So not proper grammar, but
understandable enough.
Yeah, understandable enough. And yeah, it changed my life because I said yes. How much does it cost? Come with me to the market. I helped that family. I understood it was ridiculously cheap to help these families like not have rain in their small shacks. Yeah, and then from there it just started growing. Like
that was how many years ago?
2017.
2017. Yes, and we met because of that, randomly through another friend.
Yeah.
And good work brings good people together, I believe, which also brings the third part of the podcast today. Whom? Why don't you do the introduction?
Yeah, so I'm gonna do my.
It's his job today. Okay.
That is his job.
Hosting.
I have to stop. I have to get this out of my head. I am not the host today. I have to let it go. I have to let go of control. I'm not good at this. But okay, we'll.
Yeah, so actually I'm gonna take full control and thank my new supporters.
Okay.
Ana Luísa, Helena Ávila, João Alegria, Andrela Meirinhas, Catarina Souza, Catarina Rodrigues, Jasmine Fonseca, Catarina Pinto, and Joana Gomes. So these are all Portuguese names. They sound Portuguese, right?
Yes, they do.
Thank you very much for supporting this project. If you guys are also interested, there will be a link in the description and you can support this podcast too. Today I'm joined by Meghdut Roy Chowdhury, founder of Make Calcutta Relevant Again movement and podcast, as you can see behind me. And Pauline Laravoire, founder of Y East, which is a network of impact organizations in Eastern India, and also a kind of specialist in sustainability and management for sustainability and so on. And also, they're a couple. They're married.
Yes,
and
that happened.
It took a
At
while.
the date of this recording, they were married.
They were married. Nice.
For the record.
Just getting it straight.
Yeah.
And it's been, I think, we've shot 20 plus episodes of the podcast, and she's never been on the podcast before, so I have to thank you for convincing her to finally come to my podcast. Never thought that this would require an intervention, but hey, good to have you on our podcast today. We've actually never tried out this model. When Tomas mentioned that he was doing the podcast, it's blown up recently in Portuguese and in Portugal. We said, why don't we try out a joint podcast so we can cross-pollinate between our viewers. But again, I will cut that off and back to Tomas for your role as a host.
Yeah, so let's get started with the history of the city, because one of the reasons I wanted to record with you guys is because you're both super interesting people. And also, like, I feel as someone who, I don't know Kolkata nearly as well as you guys do, but I've been here many times, along the years. And I feel like, especially being a big Tagore fan and a big fan of Satyajit Ray and like all these great thinkers and artists, which actually were from here 100 years ago or slightly less. I do also feel like, like artistically, maybe it's not as relevant as it used to be. And so, like, let's explore the history. Like, when do you guys think it stopped being relevant and why?
To you, who grew up in the city first, and then
I think relevance really happens in crests and troughs, and I think I've mentioned this multiple times before. I don't think anything stays relevant forever. And just like a city, it's a movie. A city is a sum total of all of the energies within it, right? So how relevant it will be at a given time depends on how many people are actively working towards building stories out of there which go out to a larger audience and keep the city's name in the news as much as possible. So I think we're just going through a particularly, not a very good time with the city's relevance. I think we've had so much to be proud of, from being the first capital to what we still call the intellectual capital, the cultural capital, and so many things, so many words that get thrown about. But do we have enough young idols that the young generations can be relatable, or can relate to? Or how many young people can they say, you spoke about Satyajit Ray and Tagore, and the moment we do that, it's great because we need to have those idols who've shown the path in their own fields, but how many of those idols are being made today is the question with which we started the whole movement. Because as a movement, the Make Calcutta Relevant Again community are the ones who care about creating new idols, are the ones who take this seriously. What are the new ventures that are happening in the city which needs to be spoken about nationally, internationally? And this is where I think we started. I don't know where we are today. I don't know if we've been able to make a huge amount of impetus or impact, but we definitely have newfound hope amongst young people. We see that a lot more in our LinkedIn comments, on Instagram, on social media in general. You get a pulse of people, and even a lot of people who live outside of the city, they've had to move out because of a lack of economic opportunities or because of a lack of entrepreneurial ecosystems for them to be able to build. They see a new Calcutta. They see a version of Calcutta which they can relate to more. They can see more younger people who are doing things which makes them excited to come back or send their kids back. These are the things which we are going to work towards. So there is never an end point. I don't think this movement will ever have an end point. Okay, and finally we've made it relevant. I don't think it's ever going to happen. But through various activities. I mean, the podcast is one. We run festivals. We run every month. We run a musical IP where we have fun with people. We dance with people. We support startups. We work on everything. I think you can't make a city relevant just from looking at it from one particular lens. So we've sort of taken it upon ourselves to not do everything ourselves, but to give light and to give visibility to everyone who's doing good work here. So tomorrow, when somebody else comes and talks about the city, they don't talk only about the Tagores and the Rays. They talk about all the new people, young people who are doing great work. Maybe Pauline can talk about some of those new people. I saw yesterday night you sent me that article about Calcutta and the youth, how they are changing the city.
You just said something I think very important, and that kind of relates to the way you called your podcast, which is depolarize, right? And how it's a nuance, it's a spectrum of relevance, and it's not, one day it's going to become relevant again. In the same way, it didn't lose its relevance from one day to the other, right? Mm-hmm. It's a spectrum of things and facts that happened over time. To answer your question, I think really what might have taken the spectrum to less relevance is when we started seeing talents go away. And this is also the tricky part, is that Kolkata, as in Kolkatans, may be as relevant as they were, but they're just all over the place now.
They're just
right?
everywhere. So and geographically all over the place. Not
the good programmers all moved to Bangalore.
Yeah, true.
Well, but it's true. Like, you ask
the good finance guys or legal guys move to Bombay, or
the diaspora of Bengalis and Kolkatans across the globe is absolutely crazy. Like, I don't know, 3 years ago, Abhijit Banerjee won the Nobel Prize along with Esther Duflo. How many people from who are not from India, who are abroad, actually know that Abhijit Banerjee is from Kolkata.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a lot of people do.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I think there is also that level of awareness in the global scale, that even at the national and local scale, of realizing where the Kolkatan talents is hiding all across the globe, and realizing that the relevance is still there. It's just not as tangible
Or not as centralized. I think
and
it's
centralized
more,
and simple as
yeah.
it used to be,
Yeah.
I think.
So good job. You've now become a brand ambassador for this Polaroid.
That's what it is, yeah.
I know. I really
nuance to.
I really relate to what you're trying to do with this message of depolarize, because everything is a nuance, everything is a spectrum, and I don't think Kolkata lost its relevance. I think it can be enhanced, and we need people like you to take that forward, and like you as well.
And you and all of us. And on this, I think, sorry, I have to keep coming back to doing my job as a podcast host.
It's
You can't
difficult
take
to
this
let go, huh?
Just the same way we say that you can take a Calcuttan out of Calcutta, but you can't take the Calcutta out of the Calcuttan. The same way you can take the podcast host out of the podcast studio, but you can't take the role of a podcast host away from him. So I have to come back and tell you, ask you this. I don't know how much you've dealt with, impacts of social media on polarization in narratives in general. But I'd love to know how it works in Portugal, for example, when you have these conversations with politicians, with people who are, building public policy, or artists, or people who are writing code. I don't know, businessmen. How much do you think their lives would have been different in terms of narratives had they been doing exactly what they're doing, but 50 years ago?
Well, that's a really good question, because every single episode, apart from this one, normally starts with a bit called the social and genetic lottery, precisely for people to, at home, empathize with my guest being what he is, because he was born in a particular family with a particular set of genes that nobody chooses. And so, let's say I have a very famous liberal on my podcast, and so I ask him, what was your genetic lottery and your social lottery, and how did that make you a liberal? Because immediately it helps people empathize more, like, maybe if I had been born in his family with his amount of money or poverty and with surrounded by those ideas, maybe I would be a communist too, or maybe I would be a liberal too. So
Not only empathize, I think it also allows everybody to understand where that person is coming from when he or she speaks, as in, of course, we're all biased in the way that we see realities, and this is going to talk through the ideas that we share on such platforms, right? So understanding where we come from, and that definitely allows everybody to understand that.
Yeah,
that's a
so
great idea.
Help me depolarize something, because I read yesterday on Wikipedia, and I've heard some local people say similar things, that one of the things that kind of ruined the city was that it was for 30 years or so ruined by the Communist Party. Yeah. It was the place in the world which elected a Communist Party for the longest, right?
Yeah. Which, interesting times. And
that's a world record.
Yeah. That
Good
I
on
think
you.
For 32 years, at least we have a world record.
Yeah. that one you got.
But interesting things have happened out of it. I mean, a lot of, about the family education group that we run called Techno India, that actually grew during the communist time. And it's very interesting to think about it, because here was communist rule for 3 decades, and then suddenly a young guy who's not from Calcutta comes up and, with this audacious dream, saying that I want to privatize education.
That's your father?
That's my father. And he did that at a time where there was no privatization of education, so no private schools, private colleges, private universities. He was the first person to set up a private college, first person to set up a private university, and people thought it was crazy completely, that, because it was not even possible. But things had to be like, that was against the norm. Imagine if that had started earlier on, then 30 years earlier, we lost out on that whole bit of time where progress, or at least one of the ways in which we could define progress, let's nuance everything.
I love that.
Yeah. So one of the ways in which we could define progress is industry and growth, and the idea of success for all, because capitalism works in that way. We just went 30 years later. Rather than wait early on. So people like my father had to work very hard to push back against that and create new norms of where society would make sense, because it was just attuned to the rest of the world and the way it was moving. Because you can't always be a fish swimming against the tide if you want to move towards, faster towards your goal, and where the goal is not just your own goal as an individual, it's also your goal in pushing the city and its limits forward. And if you see Calcutta, in its industrial time, in fact, forget industrial time, think of from much earlier on, even at the time when, let's say, there's a place about 5-6 years away from Calcutta called Murshidabad, and we've spoken about this on the podcast with one of the kings of Murshidabad, who's currently a prince, let's say. Murshidabad used to contribute 5% to the global GDP of the world at some point of time. It's a place in West Bengal, right? And because it was
because of the industry,
because of silk, because silk route, what we call the silk route, it was called the silk route because of Murshidabadi silk. And that's why a huge amount of industry grew up there. The first debt collectors, the first lawyers, the first CAs, as they would be today, or the first bankers came out of Murshidabad. And Bengal was...
Oh, so we're talking about 17th century
yes,
or 18th century?
Exactly. 300 years ago, this was already happening in Bengal. In fact, Murshidabad's contribution to the global GDP was more than London at that point, where the British Raj was controlling half the world, if you think about it, right?
And this was the second most important city in the British Empire after London.
After London was Murshidabad, and it contributed more, which is why the British even came to India, right? It was through Calcutta. Calcutta was the main, Calcutta ports going into Murshidabad. Silk, even before that Silk Route, they had seen and gotten attracted by the Silk Route, and then set up the, the East India Company, and set up what became 200 years of rule. But even from that time on, if you see, there has always been times where Bengalis or people in Bengal have done incredibly well on a global landscape. We've had various external and internal negative influences. So the British Raj, multiple times of rule changing, the British particularly at the end sort of taking away a lot of the good things we'd built over time, and then again reducing the sort of, I don't know if bourgeois would be the right word here, but reducing the creative thinking or doing class, or the kings and nobles or people who were doing business or being feudal lords to nothing.
The Communist Party.
No, the Communists, which was much later, right?
Oh,
We're talking even earlier. The British, when before our independence, there was a complete and absolute destruction of intelligentsia and intellectual ability in so many ways, because most people across India, but of course in Bengal, which was the place where so much of the rebellion was happening from, or was centered out of, that's when all of the British broke down these processes time and again, multiple times.
But why would they want to do that? Wouldn't they prefer just to control that production and then export it, then destroy it? Wouldn't it be more beneficial for them to just control it? But
they had a very clear divide and rule policy, right? For them, it was important that, and here, this is not supposed to become a British bashing session at all.
No, but this is interesting, because I made a story the other day saying that the people I know here, and I know people from street dwellers to more posh people, I don't hear the anti-British speech so much, so it's cool that you're the one having it.
I am never talking about the anti-British
no,
spiel.
But slightly.
Yeah, just a little bit. We should be aware of our history, I think, and this the reason why we the good, the bad, and the ugly. We can't all be it's not like in the US you completely absolve everything that you have to do with you're celebrating the Confederate flag for so many years, and then suddenly you remove it from the history books. I think it's never the right way for any society to move forward. So from that perspective, I feel it's important we realize that the British was trying to divide and rule, and as part of that, one of the things that they did very effectively was inculcate a nature of servitude and sort of the slave mindset almost within the people through education. The British have left, but we are still dealing with the outcome of that. Good things have also happened. We are the second largest, as a country, India is the second largest English-speaking population in the world. We sort of still pride ourselves on having these beautiful buildings from the colonial era. good and great, but
And the trains, were those built by the
I
English?
think a large part of the
trains?
trains, yeah, even the ones that go from Darjeeling to Siliguri, I think that those beautiful trains that we've seen, the steam trains, they were, built by the Brits. But not to, focus too much on that. The only reason I quoted that as an example was that through time, it's not like India and Calcutta, we didn't have things. We've had things, they've been taken away. And every time we've made progress, that degrowth has again happened. So right now we are at a time of massive growth is what we're seeing as a country, but Calcutta is not able to cope up with it in some way or make its place felt and its presence felt, which is my issue with the whole thing. Like, we were so ahead of our time. There was a saying that what Bengal thinks today, India thinks tomorrow. There was a time where we really were the intelligentsia, the working class, the industrial, the centerpiece of the industrial revolution in India. All of it was happening from Calcutta. Some of the largest organizations were being built out of Calcutta. The corporations were being built out of Calcutta. Most of them have moved away. And again, when communism happened, this was one of the big issues that, also again defocused us and pushed us back 30 years. We're still trying to find that footing, and it will be our jobs in the next few years to keep pushing through, better opportunities, more industry, just movement, just growth, just positivity, positive energy to bring that back.
I just want to say thank you publicly to Pauline for Why East, because when I started Kolkata Relief in 2017, there was no such thing. And so whenever I tried to get in touch with... is my microphone on?
I think
something in the air here. Yeah, so I want to say thank you, because when I started Kolkata Relief in 2017, there was no such thing. There was no aggregator. And so trying to find partners and trying to find NGOs who could be my eyes and ears and hands here was super hard. And ever since I met you, it's been a lot easier. Like, hey, Pauline, I need this and that. Oh, this NGO, Little Big Help. And so now we sponsor a community center with Little Big Help. And I think you also made the bridge to Calcutta Rescue and all that. So Thank you so much.
Thank you for the work that you do. And I'm happy to see all of the connections that WIST could enable. Yeah, that's definitely a pride.
Have you inspired similar projects in different areas of India, like NGO aggregators and sustainability project aggregators?
There are a few. One of the reasons why WIST as an idea and as a concept came to mind, and you might have seen this in the name of it itself, is that nothing was really done on that front in East and Northeast India. And I think when I landed in Kolkata for the first time 7 years ago, I was frustrated to find this narrative that was, I don't know, I was happy to be landing in Kolkata. I was happy to be there. And then I found quite a few people telling me that, the region was lagging behind, and that negative narrative that we've been talking about. And to me, no matter where you are based in this world, there are beautiful things to do, and a negative narrative cannot really help anybody. It's not helpful in any sense, right? So either you go ahead, you do things, and you let your actions talk for themselves, or you, as you would do typically, which I love, you just strategically and proactively choose optimism. That's the only way, I think, the only two ways to move forward.
I don't even think it's very strategic for me. I can only
No, this is who you are. This is who you are. But
who I am. There is no thought process that goes between, what we should do.
Of course. But then you put it out there. You made it a whole movement about, and I think it was beautiful. And in the same way, back then, when I really wanted to do something to make sense of these loose, networks of these organizations, NGOs, social enterprises that were doing amazing work, but in their own pockets. I found that there was maybe one organization that could create the link among all of these organizations. That organization was missing, and so I kind of took that slot and tried my best to do something on that. And there are other regions where it is done. There are different networks, and the fun part is how does WIST get in touch with these networks to kind of get that coherence at the national level going on. But my focus has always been quite explicitly in the name East India.
Mm-hmm. And let me just add that during COVID, for instance, like we were distributing masks and soap and rice with the help of Little Big Help, and I made this map because everyone, like the most famous slums, everyone knows them. So all the NGOs had the same idea to go to the same slums, and so I created this map, and then unfortunately not all of the people distributing stuff ended up using it. I don't know why. Maybe because I wasn't here and I'm a foreigner. But yeah, it was thanks to you also. Like we had this WhatsApp group with all the NGOs. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And I said like, guys, when you deliver to a slum, just put it here. Just put the GPS coordinates on what you delivered, because then if my NGO wants to go tomorrow, I can open the map and see, these guys got rice yesterday and no one's been to this other slum.
Absolutely.
So it didn't go as well as it could have because not everyone got on board, but thanks to you also that map happened.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Crisis builds innovation. I think that's one of the things we've all learned from our work, whatever we were doing with COVID. But how was it like I'm actually particularly curious about Portugal as well, although this is not Make Porto Relevant Again. This is not the...
Could it be though? I mean, is there something of a similar... Is the spirit similar to that?
I actually think it's brave to call, because this name, you're admitting it's irrelevant, to say make it relevant again.
Let him speak on this. What do you think?
No. It's really, some things you do purely to, ick people into talking about something.
Yeah.
So of course I know it's not
You're calling
irrelevant.
for attention.
Yeah, but sometimes you do this, it's a marketing move, right? People know about it. There's two weeks actually in it. One is the calling it Calcutta and not Kolkata. The amount of hate I get about this all the time.
Oh yeah, because it's colonial.
Because it's Calcutta. And then I say, I grew up in Calcutta, so my relatability is with my city. You couldn't.
Well, if you put the again, then it has to be Calcutta.
Calcutta, right? Because it was what...
It's your Calcutta pronouns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to put it on your bio.
By the time it was Kolkata, it was already, I had lost a lot.
And now you have the tattoo anyway, so you can't.
Now it's already there on my skin. It's not this you can change. This might be harder to change. But but I would love to hear a little bit more about where you come from for the audiences who were there. Is there a particular reason that you first started doing Kolkata Relief? I know that it happened by accident, but even then, how did you even end up here? And it's been a while since you've been doing that, one. And two is the connection with Porto. Do you see similarities between, say, Porto a few years back or even currently and Calcutta? And is that one of the reasons which keeps bringing you back?
The host is back.
Yeah. So one thing I think I can speak about with a slight bit of authority about India is Indian classical music because of my sitar lessons. And I think that the feeling I get is that the one thing that I can say that Calcutta is still the capital of, it's Indian classical music. You agree?
100%.
Yeah, okay.
Some of the greatest classical musicians of our...
Yeah, and I had teachers in Rishikesh. I had a guru in Varanasi who was very good. I had gurus all over. As I was traveling, I would meet them and I would ask them, where's the best place to learn? All of them would say it was here. And so that's why I was here, because I had been here during Christmas 2016, because I was traveling around the world by myself, and I thought, where would be a nice place to spend Christmas? And I thought, okay, Christmas is Christian, and so Mother Teresa sounds perfect, Christmas, doing volunteer work with other volunteers, made absolute sense. It was amazing, man. I never thought it would be so cool, because then because I played guitar, I got involved in the Christmas show, and so I ended up playing guitar and singing for hundreds of nuns on the balconies in Mother House.
Really?
It was crazy.
That's amazing. I love
crazy.
it. I think one of the first things you told me about was effective altruism.
Oh yeah.
That was 5-6 years ago. It was a dinner table conversation. I had never heard the word before, and it still resonates with me, the conversation we'd had. I'd love for our audiences to know about why that became a driver in your life and whether it still affects decisions that you make today.
Yeah. So effective altruism, all ideas, is kind of like a virus in the sense that I got that virus, and it's an intellectual virus, let's say. I thought it was an amazing idea, and so I started to spread it like happens with the virus.
I remember during the COVID pandemic, there was a lot of we partnered on an event, and you told about the WISE community about this particular concept. And
So what is the concept? If you
So
have to
yes.
break it down for people.
Yeah, so the concept is pretty simple. It's basically how can I do the most good possible with the resources I have, which is not it's not a genius idea, you know. It's not a Chandra Bose kind of idea to use a local reference. But basically, it's trying to quantify QALYs, which is quality additional life years. So you have an intervention, let's say it's distributing mosquito nets, and if you know, if you have good data saying like how many people are dying of malaria or how many people are losing productivity because of malaria and of dengue and so on, you can calculate the QALYs of your intervention. So how many quality additional life years am I adding? The Q is there because quality is important. Sometimes, and this can be a bit polemic, but if you're doing an intervention to someone who's 90 years old and maybe you're going to help them in something, but their life expectancy is only 1 or 2 years more, then it won't have so much of the Q. But they won't be quality years, and additional also won't be that much. But this can get very dangerous, and this is why I kind of started gravitating away from it, or let's say I kept the things I think are important about it, but I don't identify with all of it, because it quickly gets to things like, okay, we have to, instead of feeding the poor, we have to invest billions into AI research, because even if the probability of AI destroying everyone in the world is low, because the destruction and suffering is 100%, it's almost infinite, then when you make the calculations, that's where all the money should go. So quantifying good is a very dangerous enterprise and very difficult, because if you build a school, how will you calculate the quality additional life years that will make? Maybe in the school will be the next Nobel Prize in economics, which will help all the pavement dwellers in your city, you know? So it's a really good benchmark. It's a really good mindset when you're doing like interventions, especially because one thing people say a lot is, don't give people fish, teach them how to fish. But they can't die during the teaching how to fish process, right? You have to give them fish while you're teaching them how to fish.
So both are important.
Yeah, both are important. And that's why we both have this street intervention where we distribute our tarps, mosquito nets and so on to the homeless, which we're only reducing the suffering. And we have no intention of politically trying to solve that problem, of course. But we have the community centers where, like, through education, we're hoping to teach how to fish or teach people how to become involved in their communities and become better. So yeah, basically, it's a lot more than this, but it's all about like trying to maximize your impact and not only going with your emotion. One example I give is, let's say you find a 500 euro note on the street, and you decide like, I don't need this, I'm so lucky, I'm going to give it to some charity. And you have two options. You can give it to Make-A-Wish Foundation, who will use that money to pay a child to go to Disneyland, like a child with a terminal illness.
Yeah.
And like you'll get to meet the child, and she will hug you, and you'll be in the news, and like everything emotional about it will be amazing. Or you can get to 500 euros and deworm 500 people in sub-Saharan Africa, and all you'll get back is an email saying thank you for your donation. So your emotional return on investment is super low, but it will help so many more people. It will have a much bigger impact on the lives of those 500 families. And so it's kind of working in this battle of like, is the emotional return the most important thing? Maybe not. You know, it is important. There's something to it. But we have to be careful, like not to prioritize the emotional return on donation.
I love that. I don't know why it suddenly occurred to me that we had this conversation a long time ago.
Yeah.
But Pauline, last question for you is that because I barely got time with you on the podcast, would you want to be a podcast co-host with me so we can run a separate series of podcasts under the Make Calcutta Relevant Again banner, and you get to choose the topic that this subsection would be on?
That would have been my condition. So if I have a say in the direction and the strategy of this podcast, I would love to.
Cool.
She said yes.
Yay! Finally, successful podcast. Woo. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So you'll have to wait a little bit to find out what this special series of podcasts that we co-host with Pauline is and how it
Let's
evolves.
see. There's no promise, but we'll.
You just said yes.
We'll discuss.
You said it yes on like. Come on, you said yes on like live TV. Everyone has heard you.
If it happens, I'm happy to consider it.
Okay, you are invited.
I am not promising whatsoever.
You are invited with a tub of popcorn into our personal lives on the next episode of Make Calcutta
I don't
Relevant
like
Again,
to
the podcast.
over-promise, under-deliver. It's the first time you tell me about this.
Cut. Thank you, everyone. See you on the next episode.
Yeah, guys, thank you. If you're watching this on my channel, please leave a like or comment or a subscription. If you're watching it on his channel, don't. And that's all for today. Thank you for being there.
On behalf of both Make Calcutta Relevant Again, the podcast, and Deshpolariza. Deshpolariza. It's a hard word. It's a hard word to pronounce. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you
so much, guys.
Thank you.